In part 7 in our lab of the axial skeleton, we'll take a look at the thorax. So we're on the last column of our checklist. You'll see the sternum, and then we'll do the ribs. So here's an actual skeleton of showing the thorax. We can see the ribs over here. These darker areas, these are costal cartilages, right? They're made of hyaline cartilage. And then over here, this is going to be our sternum. Let's take a look at the parts of the sternum. So this top part that I want you to know is called the manubrium. There are two areas here and here for the clavicles to articulate with the manubrium. These are referred to as the clavicular notches. So I labeled it on one side, but here's one clavicular notch. Here is the other. Right in between up here, there's a depression. This is known as the jugular notch. Now, the manubrium here is going to articulate with the body. So this part right here, this long part, most of the sternum is the body. The articulation is an elevated area. You could actually feel it on you. This is called the sternal angle. We used to call it the angle of Louis, right? But now they call it the sternal angle. This is where the second rib comes in, right? It always comes in at the sternal angle. So this is the body. And then the bottom part right here, this point, this is known as the xiphoid process. Let's go back for a moment. Before we look at the specific anatomy of the ribs, you'll see that there are 12 ribs. We could see the first 9 or 10 right here, and then the 11th and the 12th we could see from the back over here. I'll actually show you a back view. Here's 11 and 12. Okay, so here's our 12 ribs, right? 1 through 10 we see really well. They're the ones going towards the front. They're going to meet with the sternum. And then 11 and 12, you'll notice they don't go around to the front. They kind of hang out back over here. So we can classify ribs as either being true or false. True ribs mean that the rib has a connection to the sternum via this costal cartilage. So if you take a look at rib number 1, rib number 2, rib number 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. If you notice, all of these ribs have a direct connection to the sternum. All these costal cartilages bring the rib directly to the sternum. But look at ribs 8, 9, and this one over here is 10. They don't have a direct connection to the sternum. They have this common branch right here. See this one common branch bringing these 3 ribs to the sternum? So as a result, these are called false ribs, right? 8, 9, and 10 are false ribs. 11 and 12 are also false ribs. If you notice, rib number 11 and 12, they don't even go around to the front. They stay in the back. So ribs 8 through 12 are considered false. It turns out we have another name for 11 and 12. Since they're just kind of hanging out back here like this, these are referred to as floating ribs. Okay, so here's our sternum. We'll jump over that for a second. We'll get back to that in a minute. Let's finish up this lab by looking at the landmarks of the rib. So we did a little bit of this when we did the thoracic spine. This top part right here is called the head of the rib. Just next to it, this constricted area here is the neck. Then this bump right here is the tubercle. So it always goes head, neck, tubercle. Now, these would kind of be in the back where the vertebrae are. Then the rib swings around like this to go towards the front of the body. So where it changes direction to head to the front of the body, this is referred to as the angle. The main portion of the rib right here, you were just kind of holding it in here, you would call this the body. And then the part that's going to attach to the costal cartilage, right, that hyaline cartilage, is just known as the sternal end. On the underside of the rib, you're going to see a groove. It's usually best visualized right like at the angle, like right here, and then it heads to the body. This is called the costal groove. So I had gone over this when we did the thoracic spine, but just to show you, the rib head right here articulates with the costal facet on the thoracic vertebrae. Here's the neck, and then here's the tubercle of the rib. If you remember, that articulates with the transverse costal facet. So now you can see the angle of the rib right here. The rib is starting to change direction. It's going to start heading to the front of the body. And that's what this picture is showing you here. You can actually see the body of the vertebrae. Here's the rib, right? Here's the tubercle going to the transverse costal facet. Then here's the angle of the rib, and you can see it changing direction, and the body of the rib here. And now it gets to the front of the body. Here's the piece of costal cartilage bringing it to the sternum, and organs like our lungs would be somewhere over here. And here's just another picture of the rib below that they cut into it. Okay, so that is the anatomy of the rib. Again, one more time: the head, the neck, the tubercle, the angle, the body, the sternal end, and then underneath right here is the costal groove. We'll see later in the semester the intercostal nerves run in there. In A&P2, you'll see that the intercostal artery and vein runs in there. So that concludes our lab on the axial skeleton.